Welcome to the 13th video in this video series on building an e-commerce website using React, Redux, GraphQL, and Firebase. Now in today's video, we're going to be looking at search filters. As you can see here, this is our search page. We have a filter here. Users can select different filters and will be able to filter products based on their selection. Before we get started, I'd just like to take this opportunity to encourage you guys to visit my official YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/simpletut, not only to look at my other videos, but I also have an official playlist for this series that you can use to not only find previous and future videos, but to keep a reference of all the videos in this series. And again, I will be posting a link to this in the description of this video. And of course, I also want to encourage you guys to check out the official GitHub repository for this project if you'd like to compare the code that I've written in these tutorials with that you have written yourself. Of course, please do visit our official website, which is simpletut.com. But as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. In the last tutorial, we worked on our search route. This is a page we set up so that users could visit it and see all the products currently listed on our website. Now, in this tutorial, we want to set up filters, which means that we'll have to review our URL structure for our search page so that we can allow users to visit search / for example, men's and see only men's products, or women's and see only women's products. So to do that, we need to head back over to our text editor and to our routes, which are currently in our app.js file. And we want to find that search route and we want to duplicate that entire route. On the second route, what we want to do is add in that URL parameter. So to do that, I'll just add this as filter type. And this just means that whatever value is currently in the URL structure here, we'll be able to get dynamically within our component and have access to that. And I'll show you how to do that in a few moments. Now there is one problem here, and that is that the way that React Router works and the switch component is that whatever route matches first is what's going to get returned. It will ignore all the other routes. So for example here, in this case, because search will match here, it will return this route, but it won't even hit this route. The problem is that, as you can see, we have /search and /search here, both are the same. And this is actually enough to return for both routes, which means that even if the user has a filter type in the URL that they're currently visiting, it would never actually hit this route because it would have matched search already. So to avoid that, on this first one, I have to add the exact prop, which means that this will only match if it is literally only /search. If the user has a filter type, this will not match because this route does not expect a filter type. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, and if not, then hopefully it will as we continue through the tutorial and you see a few more areas of our code. Let's save those changes and move on. So as you can see now, if I come back over to the browser, I can visit, for example, search women's, and the search route matches. And of course, if we look at the code again, the actual route itself is identical. We've not made any changes. We're not doing anything with the filter type right now. So of course, nothing will look any different. The next thing that we need to do is work on our UI. We need to create some UI components that users can use to filter different types of products. So I'm going to set up a form select that users can use to toggle those. So let's head back over to the code, and I'm going to go into my components folder. And as you know, we have this product results component. This is where we actually fetch and we dispatch our action to fetch the products. And this is where we're going to have to render out our select form component. Now, in an earlier video in this series, we worked on some form components. One of them was a form select component. And we've used this already in a number of different places, and we're going to use it again here. So the first thing that we need to do is import this form select component into our product results component. So let's go ahead and import that. So I'll say import form select from the folder. So it's in form select. And I then want to render this out under my H1, but of course I need to configure it. If I look at this component, it expects a number of things. We're going to want to pass these three props: options, a default value, and a handle change event. So to do that, I'm going to create up here, outside of my return statement, I'm going to say const config filters equals an object, and this is where I'll configure everything. So the first thing will be my actual options. This is going to be an array of objects. It will have two keys, a name and a value. The first one will be show all, and the value will be blank. The second, and I'll need to set up the name and value keys again, but the options here are going to be men's, and in the value it will be men's as well, but it will be lowercase. And then finally we want another one, so again name and value keys, but this one will be women's, and again lowercase in the value key. So those are our options, but we also need to have some kind of handle change event. So whenever a user, for example, selects a different option from this menu, we want to actually capture that event and update and handle that in some way. So to do that, I need to actually create that function. So I'm going to create a new const called handle filter, and this is going to be a function that takes an event. And we're going to come back to actually coding this a little bit later. But what we want to do first of all is actually pass that to our form select. So it expects that as handle change. So again, come back down to where we configure our filters. We want to pass this into handle change, which is very easy. We just pass it our handle filter function. And I'm not going to configure the default value of this select field yet, but I am going to pass the config object to the form select so we can save those changes, come back over to the browser, and we can actually see what this is going to look like. So you can kind of see how this works. Users will just be able to toggle between the different categories that we have configured. So of course this isn't actually doing anything. What we want to do here is actually push the user to a different route whenever they select another option on this menu. So to do that, we're going to have to come back over to our code, and what we want to do is come back over to our handle filter function, and we get the event. And from the event, we can extract the option that the user has selected. So we can do that by actually we can actually just say that this is the next filter, and this will equal the event.target.value. And then we can actually use something, another hook from the React Router DOM library. So I'm going to import that at the top. So I'll say import from React Router DOM, and what it is that we want to import is use history, the use history hook. And similarly to how we gained access to dispatch, what I'm going to do is say const history equals use history and call that as a function. What I can then do within my handle filter function is call history.push, and I can push a new path. So the new path is going to be /search/ our next filter. Of course, the way that we need to insert that is a little bit different. We need to say /search and then pass in our next filter. So let's save that and come back over to the browser and see what it does. So if I now select, for example, men's, you'll see that the route is pushed and I'm now on men's. If I select women's, I'm on women's. If I go back to all, I'm just on the basic search path. So that's working perfectly. But what we need to do is we need to dynamically get hold of whatever this filter type is in our URL parameter here, and that we'll be able to use not only within the UI, but to filter our products on the back end. So to do that, we need to make use of another hook from React Router DOM, which is use params, right? And again, the way that this works is a little bit different to history, right? So we're going to call this use params again as a function, but we'll be able to destructure whatever the filter type is. So again, if I come back over to my app.js file, we called this URL param filter type. And that's exactly the name that has been assigned to the value. So I'm going to get the filter type. And then again, if I come back over here, you'll see that it expects this default value. So what I'll do is I'm going to pass that in as an option. So the default value is going to be the value we get from the filter type and from the URL params. So the default value here is going to be filter type. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need to do here for our form select. If I come back over now to, for example, this page, and if I was to visit this route, you'll see men's. I have men's. If I'm on this basic route, the default value is show all. And again, I can change this manually just using the component and the UI. So that's great. And the UI is now in place and everything is kind of working on the front end. But now we need to look at this on the back end, right? We need to actually filter the products based on this URL param or whatever we select from the UI, because currently we're updating the UI, but we're not changing anything in terms of filtering the products. So to do that, it's going to be really, really easy. So what we want to do is, again, we want to get hold of this filter type, and then we're going to pass this in to our fetch products start action, right? When we dispatch it. I'm going to pass that in within an object, but we don't only want to run this code when the component mounts, because this code is responsible for going out and fetching the products from our Firebase store. But think about it. We also need to go out and fetch it whenever a user selects a different type from our filter. We need to go out and fetch it again. So within our use effect hook, we need to pass the filter type into our dependency array. And the reason that we want to do this is because whenever the filter type changes, i.e. the user selects a different filter, we need to rerun this code and we need to redispatch the action to fetch the products with the filter type, the new filter type, and that will allow us to actually get back our filtered products. So, of course, this is perfectly fine now within our product results component, but we need to actually make use of this. So first of all, let's actually look at our action. And as you can see here, we are now passing our filters. But as you can see previously, we were only, our action only contained a type. It didn't have a payload. So we now need to pass our payload. So we're just going to pass our filters, which is that object that contains our filter type. But I'm just calling this filters because in the future we might want to extend this, and this would be perfectly fine. And this fetch product start, where we were passing in our filters, we just need to make sure that we, by default, if nothing is passed into this function, we want to make sure that we pass an empty object. And then what we'll do is we need to come over to our saga, our product sagas. And as you can see, we have various sagas here, but we want to look for specifically our on fetch product start. And of course, this is the saga here. This is our generator function that handles actually getting those products. Now, of course, this receives the entire payload, so we can destructure the value that we want. We want to destructure the filter type. And of course, this is our helper function here that actually is what's going to make the asynchronous code, call. So we want to pass our filter type to this helper function. Once we've passed that, we can actually come back into our helper function. This is it. So this is handle fetch products. And this is where we're actually going to use our filter type. So we had to pass it around a few places in our application. So what we want to do is chain on an additional query that we want to run, which will be where the product category equals our filter type. But the thing is, we may not always want to filter by a filter type. We may not have a filter type, and we may not want to filter this based on this. Maybe in the future we'll have some other filters and we'll want to have different queries that we can run, but we really don't want to have more than one helper function. So I think we can refactor this code to make it a little bit more reusable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a ref. So I'll say let ref, and that will equal the Firestore. We're going to chain on our collection, which is products. We want to order by the created date, at least for now. And then I'm going to say if we have a filter type, then I want to also say ref equals ref dot, well, I'll actually just take this code. We want to say where product category equals the filter type. And then finally here I can just say ref, and again we'll come back to the rest of the code as it was, where we say then get and etc. We run the rest of this code. That really just stays the same. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's come now over to the browser, make sure you save all of those changes that we've made. Let's reload, and what you're going to see is that we are not getting any results. Now that might look a little bit worrying at first, but I can actually reassure you this is expected. And that is because we are now doing a slightly more advanced query, right? So the query we're making, it requires us to create some indexes within our Firebase database. So to do that, it's really easy. We're just going to come over now to our Firebase application. And within our Cloud Firestore, within our database and our database here, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our indexes tab. And we're going to create a new index, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to pass in the collection ID, which in my case is products. And then finally, what we need to do is we need to actually pass in the fields that we need to set up here. So if I come back over to the code, you'll see, first of all, we want to use our product category. And secondly, we have our created date. Those are the two that we're using within our query. And then finally, we have to define the query scope, which is the collection. We're only running these query on our collections, our products collection. We're not going to be running this on multiple collections. So we can just say create index, and I will give you a heads up that this is going to take a few minutes. It's not quick, but once this has completed, our code will return results. Okay, so this just finished for me, but before I continue, I just want to bring something to your attention really quickly. I've set both of these fields to a ascending order. Now, if I was to show you the UI again, you can select descending, but it will change the front-end code. So for example, if I come back over to my text editor, If you had set this to descending, you'd have to, in the order by, pass in DSC here like that. Otherwise, this wouldn't work because it wouldn't match. Now, I don't have to set that because by default it is ascending. So I can leave that undefined because it's default to ascending. But I will remind you that if you do set this to be descending here, you will need to actually set that to in the front end. Okay, so now that we've covered that, this is completed. What I can now do is return over to my app, and as you can see now, if I just reload this, I'm getting results again. But if I was to filter this, so for example, if I select men's, you'll see that I only have men's products. If I select women's, I only have women's products. And if I go over and select all, I see both. And if I was to manually enter something, for example, men's here, then again, I get only men's products, and the default value in the filter is selected to men's. So you can see that this is working. Now, before I end this tutorial, I just want to remind you guys that at the end of each of these videos, I am pushing all of my changes to this official GitHub repository. I will be merging this into the master branch once I complete this tutorial. And that means that you will be able to view all the code that I'm writing in this tutorial and throughout the series within this repository. That means that you can clone the entire project. You could just look at a specific file that I've written, compare your code with mine. So I really encourage you to check out this repository. I will be sharing a link in the description of this video and all the other videos that are in this series. And of course, please do star the project, fork it. I do appreciate the support. And of course, again, a reminder that this is a complete series on building an e-commerce website with React, Redux, GraphQL, and Firebase. This is the official playlist. I will be sharing another link in the description of the video, so please check that out. Use that to find previous and future videos and keep a reference. And again, I appreciate it. Please like, comment, and of course, subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.